Have you ever wondered if you are living out what you're supposed to be living out as a Jesus follower? Have you ever wondered? I think we as Jesus followers have a pretty good idea of what we should not be doing, of what we are not supposed to be doing. But have you ever wondered how you are doing in the area that you're supposed to be doing well in? Last week I asked the question, how important is your walk with Jesus? The week before, Pips asked the question, when did you last tell Jesus that you loved him? And so there's a theme of assessment that links these questions together, a theme of checking in, a theme of being honest with yourself. Sometimes we need to take a step back and have an honest think about how we're doing in certain areas of our lives. We do this all the time. We do exams, evaluations, reviews at work, we do budgets, we do reviews on those budgets. In our lives, we are in a constant state of assessing ourselves. We have goals, we have to-do lists, we have not to-do lists, we have all sorts of measures in our lives that help us gauge where we are at. And it's a lot of effort. Businesses spend a lot of money on this. We spend time doing Enneagrams and Myers-Briggs, and we find out what Harry Potter house we are in on Facebook, and what jungle animal test you are on Facebook, and your personality profile on Facebook. Everybody's testing and seeing where they are at with regards to how they are doing in certain aspects of their lives. Test your trivia. Do you know what is happening overseas? Do this test, do that test. But the question I want to ask this morning is, do we spend this time and effort on our walk with Jesus? Do we ask ourselves these same hard questions that we ask ourselves in other areas of our lives? Honest questions about where we are in our faith and in our walk. Do we position ourselves to want to do well in this aspect of our lives, which is the only part of our lives that can radically impact every other aspect in a good way? Now, the thing about being a Jesus follower is this is not a compartmentalized aspect of our lives. Sometimes we treat it like that. Sometimes we treat our walk with Jesus as a little box. We have it all nice and neat. We wrap it with a little devotional material, and we spend some time thinking about it at the beginning of the year, and we put our goals of how many books we want to read, and we start that Bible in a Year app on our phone, and we get going for the year, and it's all good. And then February comes, or the 4th of Jan. That's more realistic. Or if you're like me, you have a pile of empty journals, and you're trying to get better at that. We want to position ourselves to do well in this walk with Jesus. And as I said, it's the only part that has full impact on everything else in a good way. See, we can do really well financially in life, but I don't necessarily think that's going to impact every aspect of our life positively. We could be doing really well relationally in our lives, but sometimes that starts to affect other aspects of our lives negatively. It's only Jesus that can bring the improvement and the change and the positive trajectory. It's only Jesus that can bring that. So, how do we know? How do we know how we're doing in our lives? Jesus said it one way. He said that the world would know you are his disciple by your love for one another. That's what Jesus said. If the world was going to make an assessment with how your walk with Jesus is going this morning, they could make an assessment according to the words of Jesus by how you love your brothers and sisters in Christ. How do you treat your brothers and sisters in Christ? Regardless of their political affiliations, and regardless of what they think about COVID, and regardless about what their political persuasion is, and regardless of whether they think that Manchester City should win the league or not. Today, I'm battling with that today, I'm not going to lie. That we would be known that we are his disciples. You see, in other words, your love for your brothers and your sisters is the main clue about whose disciple you are. And it's very easy to tell whose disciple you are or what you are a disciple of. It's easy to tell in people's lives. You can tell after a while, specifically with teenagers, because they're still learning how to hide it, Like you go from a kid, everything's open and transparent, then you start to learn how to kind of be a little bit more sneaky as a teenager. That's kind of how the world works. And then by the time you're an adult, you're really good at burying stuff and not dealing with reality and kind of hoping and burying our heads in the sand. That's just how we struggle as human beings. And thank the Lord, thank God for Jesus. He helps us sort that stuff out. But it's easy to tell whose disciple you are. It's easy to tell if someone is worshiping at the foot of power. Their behavior starts to change. It's easy to see when someone starts to worship at the feet of money. It's easy to see that people become disciples of money. You know how you know when someone's a disciple of money? When they talk about how little money they have, regardless of how much money's in the bank. See, this being a disciple of money, being a disciple of mammon, means that even though you've got a nice car and a nice house and a fat business account, and you've got lekker e-bucks, and you can go on your holidays in the year, being a disciple of money means that you're constantly worrying about running out of money. That's the reality. You're constantly nervous about that. It's very easy to see if people are worshiping at the feet of sex. It's a very powerful God in this world. It's the lyrics and the songs that we sing. It's the advertising on the big billboards. It's the way that Netflix makes you want to watch movies by somehow taking one picture of a beautiful person in a seductive space. And even though that is like not even a split second in the movie, they know that sex sells. And so these three things of money, sex, and power, those are the three things that really do get in the way, designed by the enemy to distract us from being true disciples of Jesus. And so the thing that gets in the way of loving one another is money, sex, and power. And all problems, I believe, all problems that we can kind of sum up in this world can flow back through these tributaries, back to these three things: money, sex, and power. I digress. John says it another way. Jesus focuses on the kind of advertisement to the world. John focuses on what others think about yourself. And in John 1:3, verse 14, he says this. He says, "We know that we have passed from death to life because we love our brothers and sisters. Anyone who does not love remains in death." So here we have Jesus talking about, this is how you can test how others can see that you are a disciple of God. They can see that you're a disciple of Jesus by your love for one another. How can you see how you're doing in your walk with Jesus? Well, it's simple. If you have passed from death to life, you will love other people. That's what John is saying here. Because we love our brothers if we have passed from death to life. Anyone who does not remains in death. Let's unpack this. This is a great old book, very old book. It's called Love, Acceptance, and Forgiveness. It's a very beautiful old book, and I just want to read an excerpt from it to you this morning because it sums up pretty much what I'm trying to say. And it says this: "According to the scripture, the evidence that we are children of God is our love for other believers. If love is lacking, we remain in death. We are not sons and daughters of God, no matter what experience we claim in the past. Now, that is both frightening and liberating. I know that I have passed from death to life. How do I know it? Well, there was once a time when I got on my knees. No, that's not good enough. I know I am a child of God because I love." That's not some theological or philosophical statement. I actually do love, to use a word Quentin uses, the brethren. And that is evidence in God's Spirit living in me. So let's unpack this morning. It starts off by saying, John starts off by saying here, we know. In other words, this is how you can know. This is how you can figure out. This is the helpful signpost. This is the clue. This is what we are looking for. This is the map that we are looking for with regards to how we are doing in our walk with Jesus. This is the beginning of the test. The very next words are this. It says, "We know that we have passed." Now, this is a crucial little section of text in this passage. It tells us that there is process. It tells us that there is journey, that there's no such thing as being good by nature. John is standing is stating here that there is a change of state. We have passed from what to what? There's a change of state. When Jesus enters our lives, there is a change. There is a transformation. There is a movement from one kingdom to another kingdom. That's what happens when we enter into relationship with Jesus. And what does this change from and to? Well, then in the very next words, it says this, from death to life. We once were dead, but now we are alive in Jesus. I once was blind, but now I see. In other words, before Jesus, we were spiritually dead. It is the Spirit of God that gives us breath, that gives us life. We sang that this morning. That is the air that we breathe, the Spirit of God. He has given us everlasting life. This is the miraculous work of the cross. It's miraculous and it's also mysterious. And so here we get to see where we have come from and where we are needing to be going. And John is saying that we will know that we are no longer dead but alive. How? Because we love our brothers and our sisters. So to answer the question of how do we know what we're supposed to be doing in our walk with Jesus? How do we keep track? If I'm going to just kind of have an honest conversation, now don't interpret this as saying that we have to become incredibly strict and hard on ourselves. Don't interpret this as a review process in which you are fearful of the result of the review, like some of us are fearful when we go and have reviews at work or get reports from school. God is a God of grace. God is a God that is kind to us. But in our walk with Jesus, we have a responsibility to do everything we can to make a difference in the world around us. And sometimes it's good for us to ask the question, how's my walk with Jesus going? How's my walk with Jesus going? Am I loving people? Because that's a great place to start. Do I love my neighbor? Because all those old commandments from the Old Testament, those 10 of them plus many others, and that very wonderfully riveting book called Deuteronomy. Beautiful book, full of wonderful, and Leviticus, just full of incredible, rules, directions, boring. All that stuff was not possible to achieve without Jesus. It was only Jesus that could fulfill that stuff in our lives. It was only Jesus that could come and could make sure that we could then enter into a relationship with God because of Jesus, because we could not obey everything. But then Jesus comes and he gives a new command, a command that we can obey because of him. That we would love our neighbor as we love ourselves. And so I think sometimes in thinking about this and prepping for this, I think sometimes we overcomplicate stuff when it comes to our walk with Jesus. This is very simple, and unfortunately it has been cheapened. The word love has been cheapened by Hollywood and Valentine's Day cards, but there's a radical nature to learning to love and live away from yourselves. If you're able to love someone else, it means that you're able to put your attention on someone else but yourself. If you're able to tell somebody that you love them, it means that you're not focused on, all the stuff that's happening. If you're able to look away from your stuff and affirm and love and encourage somebody else, it means that you are able to get up and above the chaos in your life. I like saying I love you to people. And I have experienced the uncomfortableness of people being told by me that I love them, especially guys. Case in point was Kelton. Back in the day, I was like, Kelton, I love you, my bro. Yeah, thanks, Matt. It's like, yeah, I'm going to go again. Kelton, my man, I love you, eh? Hey, Matt, I appreciate you, bro. But you see, what happened in that very silly, fun example was I was relentless in my love for my friend. And eventually he got it. And eventually he now says once a year on my birthday, I love you, my brother. And the reason why this thing called love is such a complicated thing is because of our experience of it. Not all of us, in fact, very few of us, such is the nature of the consequence of the garden, very few of us have grown up learning what it means to truly be loved. There are many well-qualified people studying right now so that they can help people figure out the trauma of not being loved as kids, the rejection that comes with that. And so love is a powerful, powerful force. And we have to understand, as Jesus followers, that is how we can gauge how our walk with Jesus is going. Are our hearts filled with love? Are our hearts filled with love? Are our words filled with kindness? Are our words filled with kindness? Are our deeds soaked in kindness? In other words, you can't be in love with Jesus while you're at war with someone else. There's no room for that. Thank goodness for God's grace. Thank goodness that He will love us at our worst. But I don't want to be a Jesus follower at my worst. I want to be a Jesus follower at my best. I want to be the best Jesus follower I can be. I want to be able to tell Jesus the last time I told Him that I loved Him was 5 minutes ago. When I have to answer the question of how my walk with Jesus is going, I want to answer it. I'll say, it's going great. It's not easy. Work's hard. Life's hard. Not enough money in the bank. But despite all that stuff, despite the rain, despite the storm, despite the plagues, the floods, the pandemics, the chaos of all that stuff, my walk with Jesus is going well. I'm loving my neighbor. I'm loving my brothers and my sisters, despite their differences with me. I love them. Why? Because God's love is greater. God's love is greater. So I'm gonna release a story to this morning, a story I've never told to anybody ever before. My wife was horrified last night. She said, "You mean you have not told anybody this story?" And I said, "You're quite right, Philip. I've not told anybody this story. Not even my parents, not even my sister, not even Ross, not even the pets." Many years ago, when I was at DPHS, I shouldn't say the school, but anyway, I was at primary school. My mom was the head of the Mothers Committee, and they had organized, no, it wasn't actually that, it was a few years before that. She was involved, and they had decided to raise some money. They're going to do a fun run, which is a paradox. You can't have fun and run in the same sentence, in my perspective. Okay? If you runners this morning, hold on your seats. Okay, I'm coming for you. You could choose the 5K or the 10K. Now, I was a swimmer. This is my disclaimer about my dislike for running on land. I swim in water. So I swam from the age of 6 all the way through to the age of 18. I swam every day, sometimes twice, 3 times a day. So my whole body was really made for water as a result of muscle development. So running on land and sometimes walking on land is a bit of a mission because the muscles, that's what I say, okay? So just let me have my story. I know I haven't swum for 10 years, but still. So anyway, I signed up for the 10K run because all my friends were signing up for the 10K run. I didn't quite understand how far 10Ks was. To be honest, I didn't quite understand how far 1K was, never mind 10Ks. So it's time to do the run. So you run out the gate, around the corner, up the road, down the hill, up the hill, past all the tables with all the moms, and they kind of keep track with how everybody's doing. And I realized very, very soon in the process, I'd got to maybe 300 meters and I thought, this is the worst mistake I have ever made in my life. I do not think I will ever make another mistake like this again. What the heck am I doing running this race? But of course, you can't pull out at 200 meters. You've got to keep going. So anyway, I took my time. I ran, I walked, and eventually I'm coming around the corner and I see the finish line. I'm like, that's awesome. But as I get closer to the finish line, I notice that there are 2 groups of people. One group are running straight towards the finish line, the other group are turning left. And as I got closer, I realized, oh, flip, I've got to do this thing again. And straight away at that moment, previously I thought I had made the worst decision of my life. I realized in that moment I was about to make the next worst decision of my life, which was to continue to run the race. But there was this miraculous moment that happened, this crazy moment that happened. It was like in that moment, as I turned left and I ran a couple 100 meters, maybe even 80 meters, it was like the clouds parted and God came down in person with choirs and angels and horses, and it was just like this beautiful eternal picture. And he said, "Matt, my son, stop. You don't have to do this." And almost to back up that incredible visitation of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, telling me, he's like, "Running stupid, it's from the fall. Don't worry about it." Okay, he said that to me. I heard it from the Lord. I heard it from the Lord. In that moment, to back up his words, there honestly was. There were no moms at the table. No one was around. I was like really coming last in the 5K section with the 10K runners, and I just thought, no one's going to know. Who's going to know? No one. So I quickly did a loop back. I checked down the road. No one was coming. It was like this, like God had just confused everybody. He had just served up this opportunity. So I turned around and I ran. And there are two choices that you have. Now, I'm a good Christian. I have been a good Christian boy my whole life. I've made a few mistakes. And as I'm running towards, there are two gates you can go through, the 5K gate and the 10K gate. And I can tell you this morning, with absolute honesty and sincerity, I ran through the 10K gate. And I picked up a 10K medal. And because I had picked up a 10K medal, I'd actually done quite well because, but the reason why there were not a lot of people was because most of the other runners, except us elite athletes who had finished the 10K quite early, they were about 3/4 through the 10K race and I got my medal. It did put me in trouble when they put me in the 1,200 meter race for my house and I came stone last. That I did get caught out in that sense. But the thing is, I knew. I got the medal. Hey, I'm sure my parents they must have known. I mean, they must have known that somehow I had cooked the books. But anyway, The point of the story is I got the medal, and I must tell you, it looked lacquer. In fact, I threw that medal out like a couple weeks ago when I did a spring clean. That's how long I've kept that medal. And I've never told anybody, not because I'm ashamed of it. I'm quite proud of that, to be very honest with you. It's just I'd forgotten. I'd really kind of forgotten about it. But the thing is I always knew that I had not finished the race. I knew that the medal didn't mean anything. I knew that I had, not been honest, and I probably felt quite bad for a little while when I was much younger. But I mean, as time goes on, you forget things. And so, what does a story of a naive and silly grade 5 boy making a dumb decision have to do with knowing whether you've passed from death to life? You see, we can have the medal of being a Jesus follower. But if we're not loving our brothers and sisters, that medal is worthless. And we will always know if we're not loving our brothers and sisters. We will always know if we are harboring hatred, or we are harboring a competitiveness, or we are harboring a resentment, or we are harboring dislike in our hearts. But the wonderful thing about this is we can hide it quite well. We're able to hide it. We're able to come to church and put our hands up and in worship, and we're able to put our money into the box, and we are able to do all the things, and we can feed the poor, and it's interesting, in the Old Testament we can do all the things. We can have all the harps, and we can have everything, but if we are not doing the things that we are supposed to be doing, like living lives of justice and mercy, it becomes like a clanging gong in the ear of God. You see, no one else knows, but He does. No one else around us is aware that we are maybe not being the Jesus follower we need to be being, but God knows. You see, I knew I had completed the race. I knew that I was not being honest with myself, Thankfully, this is something that we can laugh about now. But we know deep down inside if we're harboring resentment or conflict in our hearts. We know that we know when we're not being loving. We know when we're being unkind. We know that it is just lip service. And no one else around us knows. Our friends will see the medal and believe it. That's the hard thing about being a Jesus follower. That's the hard thing about trying to measure how we are doing as Jesus followers. It's so easy to fake it. It's so easy to put on our Sunday best. Isn't it interesting, that saying, Sunday best? Isn't it random? Isn't it interesting that we are willing to put on our best? In other words, sometimes we're willing to put on really awesome clothing so that we look like we are good Jesus followers. But when all Jesus wants us is He's wanting to be there for us at our worst. In other words, do you love your brothers and sisters? I want to make the point that our spiritual life does not result from loving others. Okay, so please hear me on this. Our spiritual life does not result from loving others. Loving our brothers and sisters is evidence. It's not the basis for our walk with Jesus. It is evidence, it's not the basis. It's how we can measure how we're doing quietly to ourselves without being condemning on ourselves, not being too hard on ourselves. It's not the reason, it doesn't qualify us to be a Jesus follower. So it's interesting. Observations that I maybe have made over the years is when we are doing everything else but loving people. We're serving the poor, we're feeding the homeless, we're volunteering in the cafe, we're putting our hands up to do this ministry and that ministry. We're the first person. Often when we are fully involved in that other stuff, sometimes we need to ask ourselves, are we actually loving people? Because often there's a distraction. Often it's a sidestep. And I don't think, and I'm not suggesting this morning that we are being, sneaky and manipulative and maniacal. I'm just saying that it's important that we understand that our love for one another is a very important part of being a Jesus follower. If you're struggling to love people, you need to go check yourself with Jesus. This morning, if you're sitting here this morning and you're going, wow, your heart's beating, I am harboring resentment, I am struggling to with this, whatever it is. If that's happening this morning, this is what you got to do. You got to go to Jesus, and you got to go spend time with Jesus, and you got to go read what Jesus says about this stuff, and you got to forgive, and you got to do it in a way that's adult, and you got to find a way to move past without ignoring or canceling. So, how are your relationships this morning? How are your relationships? If you had to give yourself a mark out of 10 with regards to your relationships in general, are they good? Is there always drama at work? Have you ever wondered, while telling people about the drama at work, that you very well could be the reason for the drama at work? Awkward, eh? When's the last time you told Jesus that you loved him? Not having a quiet time, not listening to lovely Christian worship on the MP3 player, not your playlist on YouTube Premium, but when did you tell Jesus that you loved him? When did you sing him a love song? I'm very easy and open with the word love. I've grown up in a family that have made it easy for me to attach positive meaning to that word. And I'm privileged and I'm blessed because of that. But I know that when I tell the people that I love them, I don't just get a kick out of it for myself. I experience the fruit of the relationship in which I am in love with somebody as a friend, or the only person I'm in love with romantically is my wife. But I do love people. And the fruit of that love is the fruit of a relationship where you are able to be honest with somebody. That's not a romantic thing. You're able to tell your friend, I love you. The fruit of reaching that point in a relationship is an amazing space because it's honest. You can be honest. So how can you work on this area in your life? Or could we say, how can we work in this area in your life? It's by being faithful to our relationship with Jesus and allowing His love to spill out in our lives into the world around us, so that the world will know that you are whose disciple. So the other question this morning is, whose disciple are you this morning? One way to work on this is to be faithful in your walk with Jesus. Not to be religious in your walk with Jesus, but to be faithful with your walk with Jesus. Be intentional about investing in your walk with Jesus. Do a faith audit. Don't beat yourself up. Be kind. God is kind. But do an audit. How am I doing? How am I doing in this? And I think the one way in which we can really be, where we really know that we are in a good space, is when we are in a solid, knitted community. Being here on a Sunday is not the only aspect of community. The Bible talks about iron sharpening iron. It's as I walk with Jesus, we need to be effective. We need Jesus followers around that. And that's why in the next while, as we start to launch our community groups, this is not a plug for the community group space, but you need to be part of a community, not just on a Sunday morning. This is wonderful pleasantries. We can worship Jesus together. It's fantastic. But if you're not in a small group with people who love Jesus, who can be honest about that and walk the walk and to talk together and encourage each other and love each other, then we're going to struggle to love people, because people help us love. Loving brothers and sisters help us love brothers and sisters. We need more than just Sunday mornings. And so I want to read this again, this scripture again, as we kind of wrap up. We know that we have passed from death to life because we love our brothers and our sisters. Anyone who does not love remains in death. You see, there are two areas we can remain in. We can remain in death, or we can have God's words remaining in us. And I think we want to be remaining in His presence. I think we want to be remaining in His space. I think we want to be remaining in His plans for our lives, remaining in the advancement of His kingdom. And so this morning, I want us to ask that question. How is your walk with Jesus going? Simple. The way we handle that is by writing down, taking some time out this week and going, how is my relationships with other people? Are they love-based relationships with other people? And this can be really challenging. Maybe some of you are sitting there, this is quite a harsh line. It is a harsh line. It's a true line that we have to protect. We have to protect the God-given ability for Jesus followers to love other Jesus followers, and for that to be the advertisement for the kingdom of God and for a life changed. Let's stand.